Buddhism is a world religion founded by the Buddha in ancient India. Buddhists seek wisdom, meaning, inner peace, and freedom from greed, hatred, and ignorance. Mutually sustaining life, a Buddhist call to a troubled world.
If a man's mind becomes pure, his surroundings will also become pure.
I hope that your past week went well and that you are physically, mentally, and spiritually sound. If not, I hope today's program will help you to get back on track. In the previous show, I concluded our discussion on the fourth of the four marks of existence. What I would like to do today is to address all four of the four marks of existence as a whole, to present an outlook that is more in keeping with Buddhist awakening. As we do so, I'd like to once again summarize the four marks of existence. They are: life is a bumpy road, life is interdependent, life is impermanent, and life can be great. By taking the first letters of bumpy, interdependent, impermanent, and great, we get big. So to remember the four, please think big. Oh, and it gets better. Now the opposite of thinking big, or the incorrect way to see things, is by thinking life is smooth as opposed to life is a bumpy road. Life is mine as opposed to life is interdependent. Life is always the same as opposed to life is impermanent. And life is lousy as opposed to life can be great. And if we take the first letters of smooth, mine, always, and lousy, we get small. So to remember the incorrect four, please don't think small. And put together, think big and don't think small. Pretty clever, huh? Remember that I have a patent out on these phrases. So please don't use them without permission. Just kidding, of course. I would be happy if these light-hearted phrases can help you to remember these basic truths when applying them to your daily lives. Speaking of which, let's see how thinking big and not thinking small can assist us in dealing with difficulties in our lives. To make my point, I would like to refer to the four characters from the best-selling book, Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson, which I talked about in a couple of earlier shows. In a faraway land, there lived two mice named Sniff and Scurry, and two little people named Hem and Haw, who acted a lot like people today. Each day they ran through a maze, looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. One day the four characters found a huge cheese near Cheese Station C. They were naturally overjoyed with their find. Their life was going very well until one day, when they arrived at Cheese Station C, the cheese had disappeared completely. Well, the two groups responded in stark contrast to each other. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, responded in keeping with big, while the little people, Hem and Haw, reacted in accordance with small. More specifically, when Hem and Haw found their cheese gone, they were completely unprepared. They screamed and yelled, "What? No cheese? It's not fair." For them, it was not the way things were supposed to be. What they expected was for their lives to be smooth. On the other hand, the problem was simple for the two mice. They were not surprised that the cheese had disappeared, for they had noticed that it had been getting smaller every day. If you constantly consume something, Eventually, it will be gone. That's the way things are supposed to be. So for Sniff and Scurry, life was indeed a bumpy road. Now, the two little people were also deeply upset because they felt that the cheese was theirs. Hem in particular felt that way and insisted that the cheese is mine. The mice made no such claims. They did not overanalyze things. They assumed nothing. They knew that the cheese which they had enjoyed was a result of numerous interdependent causes and conditions, and that its disappearance, too, was due to the same principle. When the cheese disappeared, the little people were caught totally off guard, for they had not been paying attention to the small changes taking place each day. They took for granted that the cheese would always be there. On the other hand, the mice weren't surprised. They were prepared for the change and wasted no time in looking for their new cheese. Their actions corresponded with the outlook that all things are impermanent. For Hem and Haw, the disappearance of the cheese brought them misery. They refused to accept the situation and instead clung to the way things were. As they waited for the cheese to return, they became mentally and physically weary and exhausted. Their situation was simply lousy. On the other hand, the mice had immediately set out in search of a new cheese. It took them some time, but they did come upon a great supply of new cheese. They squealed with delight when they found what they were looking for, as it was the biggest store of cheese they had ever seen. So, for Sniff and Scurry, their situation was indeed great. The question for all of us then is, which is the better way to go? Thinking small, like the little people, or thinking big, like the mice? Well, the answer is obvious, don't you think? At any time or situation, we need to be ready to make that transformation from small to big. However, we should keep in mind that it's easier to see all this in hindsight and from the perspective of someone else's situation. When we are in the middle of our own situation, we can very easily fall into the trap of thinking small and getting stuck there, like Hem and Haw. For example, I know someone who was quite miserable for about half a year. He was in a graduate PhD program that took an average of about 7 years to complete. The studies of the program were not only very demanding, but even if he were to get the degree, the prospects of finding an academic job were very bleak. This was made worse by the difficulties of finding an appropriate dissertation topic in the area that he had originally proposed. In the meantime, he and his wife had a baby. However, because of their low income, they could not afford to live anywhere but in the university housing, which had only showers but no bathtub to bathe the baby. His friends, on the other hand, with their lucrative incomes, were purchasing their own homes, and some were even buying their second home. He felt jealous of his friends and felt guilty for putting his family through such hardships. He even questioned the choices he had made to become a scholar. He knew that the graduate program was less than easy, but had expected things to go far more smoothly and quickly. But to the contrary, he was now approaching his mid-30s and could not see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. He felt miserable, and he was definitely thinking small. Then one day, he was able to begin to make the transformation, triggered by what his wife told him. She suggested that he switch his dissertation topic to one that he was really interested in. There was no need to be stuck on the original plan. Further, she reminded him of the reasons for aspiring to become a scholar, which was to become better trained to be more effective in his eventual work. He had instead gotten too bogged down by his self-centered concerns and self-pity, and had lost the initial idealism that included the desire to serve others. Plus, his wife told him that she did not mind the low income, for she was braced for a rough economic ride as a spouse of a PhD student, and that he should not be comparing his situation with those of his friends with regular jobs. The suggestion, the advice, and the reminder triggered a shift in which he felt a big burden being lifted. He then saw how he had boxed himself in with his rigid plans, narrow perspective, and self-pity. He had lost sight of his original aspirations. He moved from the mode of thinking small to thinking big. Yet undoubtedly, we all do this from time to time, and therefore find ourselves straying away from our original intent or plans. I'm sure that you too have had similar experiences in your own lives. None of us are exempt. Such is the nature of human beings. That's why we need religious teachings to help us turn away from thinking small. Also, we need a good friend or a teacher. In the case of that graduate student, it was his wife. I know this all too well, for that graduate student was me. So I learned firsthand the meaning of today's passage. If a man's mind becomes pure, his surroundings will also become pure. I'm not sure how pure my mind became, but definitely my daily life became much more pleasant and meaningful. If you find yourself thinking small, instead try to think big. We all have the capacity to exercise the power of the mind to make a huge difference in our lives, for ourselves and for others. You owe it to yourself and to your loved ones. In the next show, we plan to have a little fun as we share some Buddhist humor from the past and present. Till then, have a good week and see you then.
We at Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai pursue peace and happiness for people around the world. We have published the Buddhist teachings into 41 languages and donated our publication to hotels and other facilities in 55 countries. We would like to share the Buddhist teachings with people around the world. That's our mission. Visit our website for more information.